Okay, once again, good afternoon to all of you. I am Dr. Crystal Shannon, Associate Professor in the School of Nursing and Associate Director of our graduate program in the nursing school. And I'm also chair of our One Book, One Campus, One Community initiative. And since 2006, our campus has really joined together in support of a common read, where we focus on issues related to diversity and inclusion. And we select our annual One Book, or academic year One Book, through a campus selection and voting process. This year, our selection is Cambridge professor Mary Beard's exceptional review and discussion entitled Women in Power, a Manifesto. We have numerous events planned to address the themes that are presented by the text, and these themes include imbalanced power structures and even a historical approach to gender inequality. Today's discussion will focus on women in politics. And Professor Beard states, as far back as Homer's Odyssey, women have been prohibited from leadership roles in civic life, public speech being defined as inherently male. From Medusa to Philomela, whose tongue was cut out, from Hillary Clinton to Elizabeth Warren, who was told to sit down. Beard draws illuminating parallels between our cultural assumptions about women's relationship to power and how powerful women provide a necessary example for all women who must resist being vacuumed into a male template. Beard is quoted as stating, with personal reflections, if women aren't perceived to be within the structure of power, isn't it power itself that we need to redefine? And how many more centuries should we have to wait until this occurs? To get us started, I'd like to ask Dr. William Lowe, Chancellor of IU Northwest, to please come forward with a few opening remarks. Dr. Lowe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shannon. And the first thing I'm going to do is invite all of those sitting in the latter half of the room to move forward a little bit and be very much part of today's conversation. I'll wait for just a minute. Thank you. That is much better. And good afternoon, and welcome in behalf of all of us here at IU Northwest to our campus on what is a very nice October afternoon. And today's discussion, as Dr. Shannon mentioned, is one of a number of programs that will take place this year as part of our annual One Book, One Campus, One Community program. And this year's book, Mary Beard's Women in Power, is being read by at least 1,300 students, faculty, and other members of the campus community this term. It's a stimulating read, and that has, for example, prompted me to do some additional reading about her many classical references. And women in politics and their distinctive experiences are an important dimension to explore. And today is an opportunity to step back from the elections and campaigning to understand and reflect on the realities and potential for women in our political processes. This is intended to be a nonpartisan discussion, and several Northwest Indiana elected Republican women were invited to participate, but it is a busy season and they expressed their regrets. Still, we can look forward to an insightful discussion of our One Book theme, Women and Power. So thank you, and once again, welcome. And Dr. Shannon will do the introduction. Dr. Shannon.
Thank you, Chancellor Lowe. Our session today really will highlight two local politicians who may be very familiar with some of the themes and concerns presented by our common read. One of our panelists actually is running just a tinge bit late. She's stuck in traffic, and I'm sure all of us can really relate to being stuck in traffic on 8094 or I-65 in Northwest Indiana. However, we do have one of our panelists that are here, and I would like to invite Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson to the stage. She is the current mayor of the city of Gary, and she became mayor in 2012, which is also her hometown. She's a former judge, attorney, and Indiana Attorney General, and she is a graduate of Harvard University. Mayor. we'll also have State Representative Candelaria Reardon. She will be here with us very shortly. She's a member of the Indiana House Democratic Caucus and is serving her 5th term. She was the first Latina elected to the Indiana General Assembly in 2006, and she serves the 12th Indiana House District. Both of our esteemed guests will actually discuss the challenges and successes of being a woman in politics today. And you heard me when I said, yes, the challenges and the successes, because it's a twofold process. The discussion will be moderated by 2 of our very own students from IU Northwest, Gabrielle Frigo and Ryan Kalinsky. The panelists should feel free to briefly discuss their own challenges and successes in politics, and then we will follow that with a moderated Q&A by our 2 students, which will also follow us having an open discussion from members of the audience to our panelists. So right now, I would like to turn it over to Gabrielle and Ryan.
Hello, I'm glad you can make it today. If the audience can please hold their questions till the open Q&A, it will be at the end. As a young woman, how were you drawn towards politics, or did it occur as a natural evolution of your professional choices?
Well, first, let me say good afternoon to everyone and to thank the Chancellor and all of the organizers, Dr. Shannon, Ms. Malone, for the invitation. I look forward to joining or to having Mara join us, and I like you already because you asked me as a young woman. But, you know, what I would say is that I think Dr. Shannon described it aptly. This world of politics, particularly as you navigate being a woman in politics, is rife with challenges, but also significant opportunities. I think that most folks embrace the concept of diversity in all forms: gender, race, religion, national origin. And so when you think about being a woman in still a predominantly male arena, there are special gifts that you bring to this. I think the ability to multitask, which is something that is not uniquely female, but it's something that we tend to do well by necessity. The ability to look for win-win situations, to not look at it, whatever you're working on or whatever issue you're confronted with, as a zero-sum game. I think you can win and I can win and we can all win and we can do something that's good for the public. And so I think that those are just 2 aspects of it. And the fact that because we are certainly have the ability to lead in government and lead in our communities, but also have still primary responsibility, most of us, for our households and our families, then we see things differently. I remember talking to a woman from the St. Joseph County area who was a Republican senator at the state level, and she talked about the fact that because she had dealt with child care challenges firsthand, she understood the importance of a child care bill that was in front of the Indiana General Assembly. So I would say that those are some of the positive aspects of it. I mean, you know, are there challenges? Sure there are. There are folks, and one of the things that struck me from the book was that cartoon, The Experience from 30 years ago, when they talk about a woman saying something and then a man saying the same thing, almost the exact same thing, and I think that happens to us still. That happens to me at least once a week. And you know, so the question is, what's your reaction? Do you say, I just said that? Or do you just say, yes, that's what I was, that was my point? Or do you just let it just ride. I mean, you know, and it just depends on which day of the week you catch me as to what my reaction is. But I think that the more we have to address it, right? Because if we simply just let it ride, then you will find that women will have even a continuing challenge of having their voices to be heard. But I think that the important thing is not just for women to value our own voices, but for men to value our voices. Because when men value our voices, then there is a likelihood that those conversations will be much more balanced.
Thank you.
Hi, it's wonderful to meet you. I have a question that actually expands a little bit on what you were just saying. So you're about to be asked to repeat yourself again, actually.
I don't mind that.
What challenge, honestly, I bet you expected it coming over here, maybe a little bit. It's almost impossible to escape. But what challenges specifically have you faced as a woman in politics? And I want to specify maybe in your personal life and also in the workplace. And do you feel that you need to prove yourself more than men in the similar or the same position as yourself?
Well, I've always, first and foremost, I would say that I've always felt that it was necessary for me to be twice as good. And that doesn't just come from being a female, it comes from being an African American female. So, and you know, is that still true as it was maybe 30, 40 years ago? Perhaps not, but it's something that as children, our parents kind of impressed upon us. And it's something that even I have impressed upon my daughter, who's now 25 or 24, almost 25. And it's just a unfortunate truth of life in America. And so with that, the challenges are that, so there's often not enough time in a day. I mean, that's just simple. This morning, I got up, you know, we care for my mother in our home. I'm the primary caregiver at night and in the morning, so I do that, I wash a load of clothes, and then I get ready to go to the office. And that's just, you know, the hours in a day challenge. But I think the other thing is for people to really understand, you know, I was thinking about the discussion about when women are emphatic, then they're aggressive, right? And or when women are expressive, then they're strident. When women are, you know, insistent, then it's always seen as something being negative. When a man is emphatic, he's authoritative. But when you think about a woman being authoritative, folks aren't always sure if that's a good thing. So that's consistently a challenge. When I practiced law, I had a judge, every time I went in front of him, he would ask me, now, is it Freeman or Wilson? I said, no, it's Freeman-Wilson. There's a hyphen there. So, you know, why am I teaching a federal judge grammar? But, you know, that was just something that he was insistent he was only going to use one name.
Especially considering his position.
Right, right.
That maybe he would have came across a hyphened last name.
Yeah. I mean, well, I knew he had
probably.
seen mine before after the first time.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was just how he chose to deal with the fact that he just wasn't interested in dealing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's at all also a tactical choice? That actually wasn't written down at all on what I'm reading off. But if you wanted to expand on it like really quickly,
Sure,
I'm just
sure.
curious if you think that that's a tactic that's in place very often. Do you think that it comes up subtly? Do you think it's a mix of both?
Well, you know, it is interesting. I think that it is a sign that I'm not really comfortable, right? Not him, not me, him. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how to address you, because obviously, you know, seasoned lawyer, been around So, but I'm just still not 100% comfortable with women being in front of me, and so I'm just going to just show how awkward it is for me, because it's not awkward for me at all.
I was going to say, I agree with
Yeah,
that entirely.
yeah,
I'm going to move
yeah.
back over to Ryan so he can ask you another question, but thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. What barriers do you think most women face in developing careers? And is there room for improvement?
I think that one of the barriers that women face in developing their careers is finding people who are both willing and have the time to be mentors. Very often, you just don't have as many, and a lot depends on what area. Obviously, we're in a university. There are a lot of women who are tenured university professors. So those of you who are looking to go and get your PhD and become a tenured track professional have a lot of role models. You know, but that's not always the case in other fields. As an example, I often encourage women to look at the construction trades, both as a company going into that business, but also looking at traditional trades, for instance, operating engineers, those who do the paving and who operate heavy equipment. And there aren't a whole lot of women in that area, but when you go to women in politics, the number is, I believe, 21%. There's a podcast that Women in Governing Magazine does. And I think it's, but it's such a small percentage of women in the political arena. Now, increasingly, women are being encouraged to run, but not just encouraged to run, because this is one thing I could say to you, you should run for office. And you say, yeah, okay. But then you have to know how to raise money, you have to know what the process is. So increasingly, not only are they we suggesting that women run, but we're providing training, we're providing support, we're providing the sort of the manual, if you will, to get it done. But I think the first challenge is not having a mentor. I think that also women are more likely to engage in self-doubt, right? That, am I qualified? Should I really do this? Can I get my point across? Do I have something to offer the electorate? Where men are just less likely to answer those questions. Even though I would suggest that anyone considering public office should ask those questions. Those are legitimate questions to ask. But once you ask them to yourself and answer them in the affirmative, then that should be done, where women tend to engage in more of a self-doubt, wondering aloud, is this something? And then the other is family support. And now that's less and less of an issue, because more women are engaged in the political arena and non-traditional fields of endeavor. But once upon a time, people would just openly ask, well, what are you going to do about your kids? Or how are you going to take care of your husband? Or how are you going to do these things? It's like, well, I don't think that's a legal question. But that doesn't stop people, even if they don't articulate it, they wonder about it. They wonder about it. We just we have a woman, welcome, Representative Candelaria Reardon. How are you? Great to have you.
Thanks for holding down the fort.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure, my pleasure. Yes.
Excellent.
So one of the things that I was just going to point out is that there is a woman that's soon to join Representative Candelaria Reardon, and she has 5 children, and 2 of whom are pretty small. And that was the initial conversation when she said she was wanting to run. And I'm like, well, now, if this woman has 5 children, surely she has thought about them before she decided to run. I mean, why do we have to ask her about that in a public arena? But, so those are some of the challenges that women face when they are in and out of the political arena, quite frankly.
Thank you. I also have one more question that might follow up. How do you believe organizations can attract more women to the workforce?
I think that one of the ways that organizations can attract more women to the workforce is to understand the value of having a diverse set of voices at the table. If you have a boardroom or an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, that has all male decision makers at the table, you will come up with a distinctly different product than if you have a diverse group of decision makers at the table. And I would suggest that the product is probably not the best product that you can have. And so if you understand that there is value and power, and that there is a positive result that comes as a result of diverse voices, then that will immediately make the HR personnel, the CEO of the company, the executive director of the organization, the chancellor of the university, that will make that person immediately say, when you hire for this position, not only do I want a diverse pool of candidates, I want you to understand that everybody is qualified for this position.
Thank you. I agree with that completely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's so exciting to meet both of you also. Do you want to expand on that last question at all?
Well, I think that I could have got here a little bit late. I apologize. I was called to Indianapolis for a 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to have to leave from here. So as I'm walking out the door, I had to go pack a bag. So here we are. Well, I would say I would concur with some of the things that the mayor said. It is challenging, and I think that sometimes the biggest challenges come from other women. That I was asked that question more than once about who will take care of my children. Who will take care of my children? Because they were 6 and 7 when I was elected, and they are now 18 and 19, and they've grown into fully formed adults with a working mom. It's crazy. But, and I said, has anybody asked Senator Mervan that question? Frank Mervan's been in the legislature for 35 years. Has anybody asked him that question? Who takes care of his children? We are in a unique position I don't think it's a unique position. I have a partnership with my husband. That's what we agreed to when we got married. It was a partnership, a division of labor with our children and raising our children together. And the fact that I get asked that question, who will take care of my kids? Well, you know what? It's crazy. Their dad, it's this thing. He lives in the same house as they do. It's crazy. So, I think that that's challenging. I also think that I concur with different points of view. I think that it's not only women that aren't represented, it's people of color that aren't represented, and in a lot of the boardrooms across our nation. And I think that decisions would be better made by a diverse group of people, chiming in, because they bring their own experience, right? There's a famous marketing fail campaign that was to, I don't know if you have heard of the Chevy Nova. Well, it was a miserably failed campaign in Mexico because Nova means it doesn't go. So, why would you buy a car named Nova, So, those are the kinds of things that happen when you don't have a diverse voices at the table.
No, I agree with you completely. Also, transgender people also. Sure. I think that part gets left out very often, so I just want to make sure that I
Yes,
toss that in there because,
absolutely.
and you know that this conversation is never really over, even
No.
after we're done with the panel, so we can discuss this a lot further, but no, I agree with you completely. And I want to ask also now, how do women in political positions have the opportunity for their voice to be heard about women's issues? But if I curve that a little bit more, I want to know, what does the experience of being a politician and trying to speak about women's issues, what does that look like? And then also, if the same questions were applied to men in political positions, to the best of their ability that they could answer those, because some could overlap with their experience, some would not. Depends on if we're talking about, of course, specific health issues for women and then like broad health issues. But would their message be as effective, do you think?
Well, I think I'll tackle the first part of the
Yeah.
question with regard to women in politics and women in, policy. I think that oftentimes, and things are changing, I think that the more, I've done like 3 boot camps for newly electeds as a mentor. And one of the things that I tell women that get elected, and I think that oftentimes we do it to ourselves because we're passionate about certain issues, right? We really believe that we're really passionate about healthcare and childcare and, education. Those are often seen as the women's issues. But where the real power is and where the real power lies is on the committees that wield the money to those causes. So a lot of times women will be like, oh, I want to be on the education committee, I want to be on the health committee, I want to be, and children and family. And those are the where they try to pigeonhole women. And there's nothing wrong with those issues because any bill that has a fiscal impact on the state of Indiana, which means the budget for education, which means the budget for Medicare and Medicaid, which means DCS, any of those issues all come to the Ways and Means Committee. So I tell my newly electeds, I say, get on the money committee. It helps with fundraising, it helps with you will see the issues that you care about because they all come through there. They all have to be funded. And you're at the table when that funding discussion is happening. We can't allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into certain, these are the women committees, I said I'm on Ways and Means and Roads and Transportation. Roads and transportation is incredibly important in Northwest Indiana. We don't have a cohesive transportation system, public transportation system. And I'm hoping that my engagement in that issue will help move the needle forward. I've been, the mayor and I have worked on the South Shore train extension to my community and the double tracking that'll benefit her community. So there's issues that are important to us, and we can't be pigeonholed into the women's realm of issues. And I think that that's been the experience of a lot of women in politics is to because we care about them. We think that it works like Schoolhouse Rock, where you introduce a bill and it gets heard. Well, it doesn't. There's a lot of discretion that goes into hearing bills, and chairman's discretion. And so it's important to be at the table when those discussions are occurring, especially with regard to funding.
That seems very much like what you were mentioning before, and I don't want to cut you off, because if there was more representation, we wouldn't have this sort of battling with the binary. If you two would agree with that, as far as women's positions and men's positions, because I think everybody in here understands that there's no there's no competition, there's no perpetrating, I think, that sort of binary that men are necessarily treated in one particular way at all times. Of course, I think that that sometimes needs to be mentioned, but I thank you for answering that, though, because I was curious about, as a woman, what sort of experience that you two have had with that. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Mayor?
No, only that I do agree that we have to be careful about what is considered a women's issue, because for so many of us, there are issues that are attractive to all of us. It's not just one type of issue. Now, there may be issues that impact women more. Mm-hmm. But there are, it doesn't mean that those are the only issues that we're interested in. And in the political world, whether you're talking about the governing or whether you're talking about getting to it, money is extremely important. So you have to be, so whenever I talk to folks about running for office, I talk to them about fundraising or being a consultant, because that's an important part of getting people elected to office, and it's a very influential part of it. When I talk to folks about, who's the most powerful person, whether you're talking about the legislature or the city council or the county council, it's always the person who's the chair of finance, the chair of ways and means, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, or the Senate Appropriation Committee. It's just invariably that's the person that folks look.
And I think we get a lot of that too with and as people of color as well. Is this a Black issue? Is this a Latino issue?
Sure.
No, because everybody needs a job. Everybody needs health care. Everybody needs an education to get that job. These aren't women's issues. These are people issues.
It's just an
And they're
unbalanced.
constituent issues.
No, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Just an unbalanced system, of course. If there was adequate representation, I think you two would agree that this sort of conversation would shift in a bit of a different direction.
Oh,
It would be
absolutely.
like a little bit cleaner even than going off into certain sort of conversations, but I think you two would both probably agree it's
Yeah.
definitely an unbalanced system at this point. But I'm going to step aside so that Ryan can ask you another question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is an open-end question, so whoever wants to answer it, or if you both do, that would
Careful,
be-
you got two
I
electeds
know.
sitting at the table, open-ended
both can
questions.
take a stab at it. So with the current president, do you believe women are more likely or afraid to speak up if they have encountered abuse, sexual assault, or rape? If so, please explain.
Well, I can tell you that for a very long time, the culture in this country, in every arena, whether it's in politics or whether it's in business or whether it's in Hollywood, the culture has been that boys will be boys. And I really believe that this Me Too movement has changed the way changed the conversation. I, as you probably all know, was the victim of a sexual battery by the highest law enforcement officer in our state. And I chose to come forward. I chose to come forward and speak out because the three other women that were affected, that were also affected by his behavior, the three other women were young women who were afraid to come forward. Three other young women were afraid to come forward. And I felt it my responsibility to be able to come forward. I did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And so why are we hiding? Why do we have to hide? And I'm hoping that this generation sitting right here doesn't ever have to hide anymore, that my voice allowed two of the other three women to come forward. And that's the important thing, is that you have to speak your truth, and you know that you didn't do anything wrong. And as long as you're telling the truth, there's nothing that can happen. You just have to, is it hard? Absolutely it's hard. I've been, my character has been impugned. I've been, colluding with the enemy according to, colluding with the other women. And those things aren't true, but it doesn't matter. It is hard. It's not easy. It's media scrutiny all the time. Facebook, I can't tell you how many horrible things people say about me on Facebook, but you have to grow a thick skin and know that hopefully what I'm doing now will change it for all of you guys out there.
Thank you for sharing that story, and I'm very sorry for that to happen.
Likewise, there has always been historically the objectification of women, looking at women as objects. Whether you're in the political, entertainment, educational, in many arenas, business, judicial. And so the current climate, even with the cavalier way in which the president has addressed those claims against him, against now Justice Kavanaugh and other men in his sphere. But the fact that women like Representative Candelaria Reardon and other women have chosen to be courageous and come forward, I think it sends a message to other women who have been the victims of assault, of harassment, of different things, and quite frankly, women and men. It gives them the courage to say, this has happened, this is not okay, and I want to see something done.
And I would just add that it's incredibly difficult to a conversation to have. I mean, it is a hard conversation to have. But the reason, and we all, I mean, ladies, I'm sure that you've been in situations. I know that we all know who they are, who the bad actors are, and we all warn each other. Oh, don't go to lunch with him. Don't get a ride home with him. We all warn each other instead of shining a light on them, because predators thrive in darkness, and we shine a light on them and they lose their power. And so that's why it's so incredibly important that people speak out against all injustice, not just sexual assault or sexual battery, but all injustice. I've taught my kids to speak out when they have an opportunity, and of course my daughter now argues with all her friends about politics, but so I mean it's important to speak out.
Thank you both.
I'm going to actually jump around on questions a little bit, considering how the last question that I asked you, because both of you have mentioned specifically what it's like to be a woman in politics and also a woman of color. I'm curious if the two of you would like to address ways in which we can ethically address and rectify this sort of discrimination.
I would say the first way that you address it is to acknowledge that it exists. Earlier, Mar said that you have to take it out of the shadows and you have to take it out of the darkness. So you have to really, and I would be even more specific to say in workplace, you have to make it easy for people to come forward. I'm not saying make it easy for people to fabricate stories about anything, but you have to create a policy that makes it easy for somebody. If your policy says that I have to report it to my supervisor, then what if my supervisor is the person who is harassing me? Mm-hmm. And you don't give any recourse for someone who is being harassed by his or her supervisor. So those are the things that we can do in the work environment. But I think the other thing is to keep it front and center. Talk about it. People don't like to talk about difficult things. Race is another example of that. Nobody wants to talk about race. But, even over 100 years after W.B. Du Bois said that it is one of the Achilles heels of our society, it's still here. But folks don't like to talk about it, so you have to address it publicly. And then the third thing I'd say is teach your children something different. That gender, that, we shouldn't be so focused on gender that you really pigeonhole your children into certain categories. Okay, boys do this, girls do that. Well, what if I'm transgender? Well, I don't know what you do. So, why are we even categorizing our children at such young ages? We're buying them blue and we're buying them pink and, things of that nature. So I would say the third thing is to really educate your children about how to be kind, how to be open to all people and not just to look at certain folks a certain way.
I can only concur. I really think it's important, and it starts at home. It really does genuinely start at home. I cannot tell you, my daughter was shocked when she came home from like, I don't know, 3rd or 4th grade, and she said, Mommy, is it really true? They were learning about the Jim Crow laws, and she said, is it really true that Kaylani couldn't drink out of the same water fountain as me? Because Kaylani was her friend who was biracial, and she was shocked. She's like, Mommy, that wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't that long ago. It really, really wasn't. If you look at the history of the world, it really wasn't that long ago that we were separating people by the color of their skin. And that conversation and that mindset is something that people are not born with. And so it really does, I love, love, love that my children do not see race or gender or any of those things. They just don't. They've grown up with so many different opinions that they've been able to form their own. And I love that. I love that they don't see color and that they don't see gender in their friends, in their, in their relationships, any of it. They're 18 and 19. So, I think that's a really relatively new phenomenon. But I'll also talk about this climate. I think that, for so long we have been, trying to keep racism in the forefront has been, through affirmative action laws and things that are important, has pushed down for a while, it pushed down until Barack Obama was elected. It pushed down the overt racism, right? And now it's just out there in your face. People are, you've got a president that's addressing a hate group. We've got, in the state of Indiana, we have a summer study committee that studied the hate crime, to passing hate crime legislation, and came out of a summer study committee with 0 recommendations for hate crime legislation. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous in this day and age that we can't get a hate crimes bill. So I would encourage you all to contact your legislators and your governor and your lieutenant governor and talk to them about hate crimes, especially this attorney general who does not also support hate crime legislation.
Thank you so much. I would say that also opens the floor for, again, addressing the different categories that affect people's experiences, because I did want to ask you a little bit on the not seeing color versus understanding how to approach race, gender, disability, preferences and such, and be able to see people as human beings, of course. That's like what I think kind of comes along with that sort of conversation. So I thought that it was interesting that you said that, and good for your daughter also that she's able to have that conversation early, because that doesn't always happen, of course, especially within like maybe the modern school system, if you would believe that, or if you would agree with that, with the curriculum that's given to kids. But maybe that would be honestly a different question. That would probably be a different conversation segueing onto that, maybe.
So I want to, how many of you saw The Hate U Give this weekend? So the thing that I would say is that you absolutely want your kids, we want our kids, and our kids are around the same age, not to be biased with color and gender and differences, and not to emphasize that. I'm not sure, and I'm just, the jury is still out for me. I think I want them to see it, right? And I say that because when they see it, then they can acknowledge the friend who's not as open as they may be to treating everyone the same, to say, well, wait a minute, why did she say this to Kaylani in this way and then she didn't say it to me? Or why did she say it to my other friend this way and not say it to me? And when they have that desire and innate belief that everybody should be treated the same, they become the best advocates for addressing those who don't treat folks the same like they do. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe I misspoke that they don't
Yeah.
see color. It's
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter to them.
Right.
I guess
That's
that's
it.
the thing,
Yeah,
is that it doesn't
yeah.
matter to them, because they're, they see color and they see differences, and they'll say to their friends that, and as their friends will say to them, is that a Mexican thing? Or they'll say, is that a black thing? Like, I don't know, they want to learn about what that is. Is that a cultural thing that I'm not aware of? They want that exchange, and they have no qualms about asking, is that a black thing, or is that a Puerto Rican thing, or whatever. They want to know the answers, and so they see people. I mean, it just doesn't matter to them.
No, I
That's what
agree
I'm
with
trying to
you.
say.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with you, because of course we don't want to other anybody in any way, which I'm not saying that you were doing that at all. I agree with you. It's of course like starting that conversation, which has been the theme. I think we have to obviously address these things by name, like you said, Mayor, the uncomfortable conversations to get that going, to get to a favorable place. So no, I agree with you. I'm going to move back over to Ryan.
By the way, I love the book choice, and thank you for
Yes.
getting it for me. When I heard that you guys were going to be reading that book, I ordered it and I read it, and then I got another copy. So I have mine's all marked up. So my daughter I'll have one for her too. A clean copy.
Yeah, it's a very good book. I recommend everyone to read it. As more voices are rising, though, more issues are being heard firsthand. One of the topics is rape. How do you believe rape offenses should be handled by university staff on college campuses, and not even college's campus, maybe like the world in general?
So I've prosecuted rape offenses and I've defended them. And what I can tell you about those offenses is that there is so much in our subconscious, meaning as a society, that impacts the ability to hold people accountable, the willingness to hold people accountable, the fact that, everybody comes to their work and their vocations with a bias. So you have to be very careful, whether you are talking about a police officer who does those investigations, a prosecutor who's entrusted with making sure that every victim's case is properly adjudicated, or in a university setting, the members of the committee who listen to or who hear those cases. You have to be very, very careful about the people that you choose. I mean, there are just, I found it, and it was always something that was troubling to me. I found it easier to defend rape cases than I did to prosecute, meaning that it was easier for me to get a not guilty than a guilty verdict. Now, what does that say? I mean, immediately people go in the jury room asking or saying, well, did you see what she was wearing? I should be able to.
She doesn't look that old.
She doesn't look like, anybody would want. I should be able to walk up and down this aisle unclothed if that's what I choose to do. Now, you may say, you know what, she needs to go put some clothes on. But that doesn't give anyone a right to, exert power, because that's essentially what rape is. The exertion of power over another person using sex as the object. So I just, you have to be careful in the way, but I think that they need to be fully adjudicated. So often people say, well, we're going to leave that for the police. No, you can't leave that for the police. The police need to do their job, but the university also needs to do its job.
Thank you.
We have 2 more questions left, and then we're going to open it up to the Q&A for everyone, if everybody's ready. But I am going to ask you, it's a bit of a wrap-up question. What are your hopes and dreams for the future of women in politics? And I'll also include women in general in the public sphere, considering the news and such. That's a super broad question, but maybe I'll take it back and specify, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of women in politics?
Well, I hope that we wouldn't need to have panels about how to get more women in politics. I've been on a lot of panels about trying to get more women engaged. I think that for me, that I would like to see a General Assembly that reflects the population in our in our state, and that means Black and brown people and women to be represented in the House of Representatives. Where I serve, I'm one of 100, and I'm the only Latina in the entire state of Indiana, which is crazy to me, because we're almost 7% of the population, and I'm the only one. I'm the only one. So I would like to see, I would like to see the bodies that govern us reflect the people that they serve.
So I am by nature an optimist. And this weekend, I had a wonderful opportunity to spend some time in Georgia campaigning for Stacey Abrams. And so my hopes and dreams are wrapped up in the future, that won't be such an anomaly that I'll just feel moved to travel, because it will be happening in Indiana and Illinois and other states, and it'll be as a matter of course. So my hope is that the majority will rule, right? Because I believe that the overwhelming majority of people are open to treating everyone the same, whether it is because of gender or national origin or race or religion or ability. I think that the overwhelming majority believe that folks should be treated the same. I think the problem is that you have this vocal minority of ignorance, right? That just opens their mouth and they just go on for days. And those of us who know better sit back and say, I can't believe they're saying that. But we never say, you're wrong. We just shake our heads to ourselves, talk about it in small groups, but we never challenge it. And I think that if I could teach the next generation, even little kids, nothing but the ability to speak out in a respectful and forceful manner against things that they know are not right. I think if we do that, if we give that gift to each subsequent generation, then we have the ability to turn this around. Understanding that there's somebody at home teaching their kid ignorance, so you have to really give them the tools when they get to school to say, even with your parent, when you know they're teaching something that is not right, you have to speak out against it.
I agree. That's conversation also, like we've been saying, engaging in that sort of dialogue. I agree. Let me see.
And everyone, as we start to wrap up for our open Q&A, I'd like to ask you to line up on either side of the aisle for those of you that have questions. Final question for myself?
Extra credit for questions. No.
Well, you saw my syllabus.
Yes.
Are you guys ready? Yeah. Okay. Fill this then. We have mics for both of the aisles. If individuals do have questions, if you can please come to both sides.
There you go.
And I'll just help to kind of moderate the line that we have going on here. So
They are
just
getting
one at a
extra
time,
credit,
if you
aren't
guys would like to step up and ask
It's like a
your
town
questions.
hall meeting about a controversy.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm from School of Nursing. My question is, in 2016, a community health needs assessment was conducted in Northwest Indiana. A part of this survey included access to health services. Participants reported persistent barriers such as affordability of services, cost of prescriptions, and doctor visits. In your political position, how are you addressing these needs?
Well, that would be me, probably. these are persistent issues with our healthcare system as it is now. We have been working through the budget process to address some of those concerns. However, I think that oftentimes Northwest Indiana is not always heard. And I think that providing those health assessments and, that dialogue with legislators has to continue. And we had a chairman of Ways and Means who was a physician. So a lot of those issues have come to the forefront, and unfortunately he just had a motorcycle accident, so we're really not sure what this next budget cycle is going to look like. But through the budget process is really the only way that we can allocate those resources. Now, we also have, we've also worked here with IUN with regard to access and trying to, there's been the discussion of a medical school here in Northwest Indiana here at the IU campus, and that continues. And I think that that's going to be one of the ways that we can support the effort here in Northwest Indiana is through increased support to the medical school here.
Thank you.
The other thing that I would say, we are very fortunate that we have two federally qualified healthcare institutions, one right across the street, Merrim, and then one on Fifth Avenue, Community Health Net. And so that helps to address affordability, access to care, and then what we've done every year since the Affordable Care Act has been in place is actually sign up people in City Hall. So that also addresses their access to health care. And then whenever we have an opportunity to partner, for instance, I believe it was, there were two, LaTroy Hawkins and Kenny, what's Kenny's last name? Kenny Lofton. The two baseball players went to one of the local schools for eye exams for the kids, and they partnered with the medical school here to give those exams and local ophthalmologists. So all of those things are ways that the city supports healthcare. And then I've been very adamant about our public health department and making sure that as we look at our budget, even though we may not be able to maintain a traditional public health department, I'm not willing to say, well, anybody who needs the, testing that we do or the shots that we give or the other direct care services that we provide has to go to the county, because immediately that would create a barrier because of transportation. I would say we're going to partner with Community Health Net, with Merrim, to provide these services. We just don't have to do it as a city department.
And at the state level, we definitely encourage those kinds of partnerships. It allows communities to leverage their dollar, right? That they get a certain amount, and then they can leverage them when they partner with other organizations, and the dollars go farther to serve the community.
Hi, I'm a student here in the School of Nursing, and one of my questions is, what advice do you have for those women that want to be advocates and don't know where to start or how to begin?
Well, what kind of advocates do you want to?
Like, how did you start it?
Okay, so for me, I grew up in a family of community activists. So where there was a wrong, my parents wanted to right it. So for me, it started at home. If you don't have that, I mean, you're the one who's starting it, right? So you have to figure out what you're passionate about and what you want to focus your time at doing. A lot of this whole progressive movement has been very engaged in the political process and in making changes to the political process. If that's what you want to do and you want to engage in the political process, there are many campaigns that are going on right now between now and Election Day, the first Tuesday of November. We need to get people to the polls, whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican. People need to vote. People need to vote, and they need to, people died for the right to vote. And there's a lot of people that just take that for granted. Focus your efforts, if that's what you want to do, is to try to find somebody that you're passionate about. Work on the campaign. Use your human capital. You don't have to give donations necessarily if you're not able. You can walk and you can knock and you can make phone calls. Those are all the things that you can do. Now, if you want to lobby the mayor, you'll have to go to her office and city council and those things. It depends on what issues are important to you. There's a whole host of ways that you can get engaged in the political process. And I think that, one of the things that I love about speaking to kids at the elementary school level is that they're so excited about, like, they were going to have a petition to have a salad bar at their school. You know what I mean? So those are things you have to figure out what you're passionate about and find out who's in charge of making it happen and go straight to the source. Those are the ways to get engaged. And, political campaigns are looking for people right now to go knocking and I would also say that run for office.
Thank you.
Run for office, run for school board, run for local township advisory board, run for city council, run, not for mayor though.
Thank you.
And I think probably if we are given the number of people, maybe if we alternate, unless it's something that's just burning. I agree with Mara's answer though.
Oh, sorry. I'm sure.
Yeah, they like us.
Thank you. Infant mortality is considered to be the window to a country's health. The U.S. has among the highest infant mortality rate among the industrialized nations. What processes do you think can progress the health of the population, especially in Lake County, which has among the highest rate in the nation?
I just served with Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C. She had a maternal health panel. And the thing that I think from Flint to D.C. to Rochester, all of those cities were mentioned, to Gary or Northwest Indiana, was the importance of prenatal care and really getting women, particularly young women, involved with prenatal care, which goes to the other question that was answered or asked rather about access to health care. These things don't happen in vacuums. If you have access to health care, then you're more likely to get prenatal care, which is will have a greater impact on the health of your unborn child and once your child is born. So I think all of those are tied together, and I would just suggest that you really need to emphasize this to people in non-traditional settings. So in the barber and beauty shops, in their communities of faith, sometimes when you're driving through the McDonald's drive-through line, or in the local salad bar, you want to get that information to people so that they understand that prenatal health is just so important.
Thank you, Mayor.
I would just add that that is one of the issues that this governor is working on right now. There's some prenatal initiatives that they're looking at across the state. So I would look for that, doing some work there.
Hi, good afternoon. I had a question. You mentioned helping campaign with Stacey Abrams, and I saw in a recent interview she mentioned that one of the issues that she had throughout the course of her campaign is she was always presented as the black female candidate, and I'm forgetting the name. Her opponent was always presented on his issue. So I was just wondering if you had faced that and your thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting because as the first female mayor and the first as the first female mayor of this of the city and the first African American female mayor in the state of Indiana, I did not have that experience, and I think it was fortunate not to have it because when I talked about issues, I talked about issues that were relevant to all folks. But understand the narrative about Stacey, and I think the thing that just made me want to go down there and lead a group of folks to support her is that she's not ever articulated that. I mean, here's someone who led the party or, led the minority in the Georgia Senate. So she clearly has been speaking to all issues on behalf of all folks. But that kind of goes under that same category when the president said she wasn't qualified. I'm like, okay, I just went to Yale Law School, but I'm not qualified. Really? So, I think that goes back to the book where people have to essentially demean and lower someone else so that they can feel like they should be held in greater esteem.
It's about marginalizing women candidates.
Yeah.
It addresses their gender and their ethnicity as opposed to their issue. And it's just a way to try to marginalize them.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Kind of feels like you answered some of my question there, but so in your opinion, what are the qualities of an empowered woman, and why do so many people consider empowered women in politics as non-traditional females who has lost their femininity?
Because for years and years and years, the women that were the groundbreakers, they had to dress like men, they had to act like men, and I'm thankful that they came before me because I don't like to wear suits. I don't. That's not my look. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I don't look good in pants. I just don't like it. And so I think that's to me really, the women that came before us had to play that role and had to, the Hillary Clintons of the world, they couldn't speak their mind and they had to watch how their voices were heard and perceived. And, I think that's unfortunate. And I've done everything in my tenure in the General Assembly to not fit into that mold of not trying to, I think that you do a disservice to yourself if you have to temper your comments all the time, and the way you're perceived. I think, and not that it hasn't come with its own challenges. I've certainly been marginalized as well because I'm not older. I am older for you guys, right? But I'm not, I'm not like, if you look at the median age of the female legislators, they're 60 and above, they're not, and so that's been challenging. I don't fit into that little mold, so I think it's hard. You really have to kind of find your own path, really, and be true to yourself.
I would say that an empowered woman in and out of politics is someone who is comfortable in her own skin. So that if you like to wear pants, you can, but if you like to wear dresses, you can. Or if one day you want to wear a dress and one day you want to wear some pants, you can do that too. But you're not going to be controlled by stereotypes and outside expectations. Even in the tone of your voice, in whether you get excited or not, how you wear your hair. I just recently, because I'm going to be the president of the National League of Cities. Now this is easy for me, right? But I thought, well, I wonder if I should get a perm because now, I'm going to be. And I was like, wait a minute, this is what works for you. And quite frankly, why would you even think about that other than you like a perm, right?
Because I can tell you, Frank Mervant's not thinking about what he's wearing.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
He's not.
It's
I'm going to
true.
tell you, those legislators that I serve with, holy moly, they wear the same suit for a week straight, and they change their shirt and they tie. That's it. So they don't worry about that. We shouldn't either.
Why should we? That's it.
Thank you very much.
Hi, are your emotions and actions used against you more personally than a fellow male's would be?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that when you saw Brett Kavanaugh crying, he wasn't criticized for crying, but well, maybe on Saturday Night Live, but that's it. That's like the death knell for women in politics. If you start crying, there's no crying in politics. You know, that's the first thing you're going to hear. And so it is challenging because we are passionate and we do care passionately and deeply about the communities that we serve. And it is hard to sometimes not, I serve in the minority. So, it was a very emotional vote for me on an immigration bill that we were taking on the Thursday before Easter Sunday. All of these religious, these so-called Christians, the so-called Christians passed a bill that was everything but Christian. It took away in-state tuition to undocumented kids. And that infuriated me because I didn't, it was so, but for education, that would be me cleaning the hotel rooms that I stay in, or trimming the shrubs of the college where I attended. But for education, that would be me, and I was very passionate about it. So it is really hard sometimes to not get up there and not cry out of frustration, And so I think we are held to a different standard, for sure.
Okay, so my question is geared toward our Representative Candelaria. Mayor Freeman-Wilson had mentioned earlier about the initiation of like a mentorship program for young women who want to get involved in politics. And I was wondering if you had any sort of like support towards or help developed any programs that would support women getting involved in politics.
There are several that have sprung up recently that I've been engaged with. One of them is for Democratic Women, Who's Your Women Forward, where young women apply and they're mentored, and there's a whole curriculum and of things, and they just had their first inaugural class. So yes, there is that. And then for me, I have focused my efforts on Latina women. As the first Latina. When I started in the Indiana General Assembly, I started a program called the Latino Fellows Program. And so I bring high school kids to the State House. I ask for 5 kids from each high school, bring them down to the State House, and it sort of piggybacks on our PAGE program. So they get a tour of the Capitol, they get to have a financial aid workshop, they are addressed by some keynote speaker of our choosing, they get to pass a mock bill through a legislative session, and they get to meet their own representatives. So when I was looking in, I don't know if you guys know my history, but I was elected, I served 4 terms in the General Assembly, and in 2006, I was first elected, and in 14, I lost. When Indiana had the dubious distinction of being the lowest voter turnout in the nation, having the state with the lowest voter turnout in the nation. So your vote does matter, so show up. I lost by 411 votes. So I decided that I was going to run again. I had to pick myself up and dust myself off. I ran again. And when I was looking for a campaign manager, a resume came to me from the state party, and I looked at it, and I was very adamant that I wanted somebody from the region. I am tired of all of our campaign staff coming from Indianapolis. They don't know the region. They don't know us, right? And so I was adamant I wanted somebody from the region. This was a resume that came to me. And I was on the phone with her, and I said, her name is Samantha Lozano, and I said, your resume is impressive. Tell me a little bit about yourself. She said, well, we've met before. She said, you probably don't remember me, but you brought me to the State House when I was a sophomore in high school. Wow. And I said, you're hired. And so that was, that's what it takes. But if I wasn't in a position to hire somebody, that's what it takes. It takes being represented to be able to help somebody, give them a leg up. So now she ran my campaign. She was the only campaign in the entire state of Indiana to beat an incumbent Republican legislator in the entire state. She was the only one, and now she works for me as my legislative assistant. So those are the kinds of things that we all have to do, is helping other people up the road. And one of the other things that I always tell my kids, my fellows when they come, and I'm going to tell you, that oftentimes life is not always, and I'm sorry to say at the university, But it's not always what you know. It's oftentimes, more often than not, it's who you know. And now all of you in this room know me, and you know, Mayor Karen. So if you ever need us for anything, please don't hesitate to contact us.
True.
You know, not everybody knows a state representative, but now you do. So please
Use it.
use it to your advantage.
Hello. I was wondering if there was a specific event that inspired you to want to get involved in politics.
For me, I was 7. I had the opportunity to meet then mayoral candidate, Richard Gordon Hatcher. He came to my house at that time on the political trail. People would have parties in their homes. They called them house parties. And candidates would come and give their platforms, and there might be some snacks. Well, my parents held a house party, and mayoral candidate Hatcher was one of the participants. And I remember listening to him talk about what he wanted to do as mayor of Gary. And I remember thinking, I think I'd like to do that. And of course, I took the circuitous road. I mean, I went down to Indianapolis, I went out to Washington and worked for not-for-profit, but always in the back of my head was, I want to be like Mayor Hatcher. Now, it didn't matter that he was a guy and I was a little girl, because, you know, I was entitled from my parents. I knew that I could be anything that I wanted to be. At least that's what my dad taught me. And so it took a while, but in 3 runs, until I won. But that was what inspired me at a very early age.
All right. Thank you.
I had, so my parents were both, as I mentioned, they were both community activists. My mother was also the first Latina president of the Indiana Federation of Teachers. And she was the first president nationally as well. And so my dad was the first Puerto Rican city councilman in the state of Indiana. And so I came from a family of firsts, and it was always for them about being impactful in their community. And that's always what I wanted to do, somehow be impactful. I didn't know that I would be serving in the General Assembly. That was never like a goal of mine, to be in elected office. My goal was to be engaged somehow to make my community better. And I just sort of fell into, John Aguilera, who's running for treasurer of the state of Indiana right now. He's a Democrat that's running for treasurer, state treasurer. He likes to introduce me at functions as his greatest success story, because he came to me and asked me to run. And that's one thing I'll also tell you, ladies, that women have to be asked about 7 times to run before they run, which, you know, the men think they're born running. So don't ask yourself, jump in the water. But John likes to say, oh, you know, this is my success story. I came to Mara, and what he doesn't tell people is that he asked 2 other people before he asked me. So I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, but I always knew this was a path that I wanted to take. I worked for Congressman Oslowski for 5 years, working on his federal grants and projects. So, I mean, I knew I always wanted to be impactful, but I just didn't know it was through elected office.
All right. Thank you.
And this will be our last question at the end.
Well, thank you all for your wisdom and experiences sharing with us today. I have a question. How did you navigate power structures, especially when you felt increased pushback being like a woman?
I'm a woman and a middle child. So I've always tried to be the peacemaker. You know, I've always tried to be a peacemaker. And I think that when you're navigating power structures, a lot of times you have to, I think of that My Big Fat Greek Wedding movie where she's like, you know, she tells the head which way to go. That's oftentimes, I think, my role in the General Assembly has been, you know, I think men are just wired differently. They have to be in charge, and they have to take credit for things. And I think there's less ego with women leaders. And I think that that's to our benefit because we get things done, but it's to our detriment because then other people are taking credit for our efforts sometimes. So it's really, it's a tenuous thing to try to navigate the power structure without being threatening, right? Without being threatening.
I think also that what I've tried to do is if you're focused on the needs of the people, then you will communicate in a way that allows you to get things done. Certainly, Representative Candelaria Reardon has had to do it in the minority, in the General Assembly. Even when I go down as the mayor of a Democratic city or a city that votes more Democrat than Republican, when I go down to the Republican General Assembly or talk to the Republican governor, I'm focused on the issues. And a lot of times when you have that discussion, people have this epiphany that, well, she's talking about the same thing that someone from Carmel or someone from a more rural county is talking about, because it's about education, it's about the opportunity to have a good job for decent pay, it's about making sure our seniors are taken care of. All of those things are universal. So what I've done is try to find the commonality, which is essentially the same as kind of being the peacemaker. Now, there are some things where you really do have to draw the line. And I think that when people understand that you're willing to do that, that you're not just willing to agree to everything, no matter, because you're trying to get something done, but when you disagree, you say, I disagree with this, and you move on. You know, you don't have to stand and jump up and down and do all of that. I mean, there are times when that's appropriate, but you have some friends who are willing to stand and jump up and down and say, see, told you this was an issue that you probably should think a different way about. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about trying to get to a decision that everyone feels good about because you're able to deliver services to folks who need it the most. For so many people, you guys may have a trip down to the State House, but the overwhelming majority of people in my city, and quite frankly in all of Northwest Indiana, they won't have that opportunity. They won't write a letter for themselves. They won't address those things that are really of concern to them, whether it's health care, whether it's child care. And so, or whether it's the support for a tax break or a tax credit that may make a difference in their bottom line. And so we have to be willing to be that voice, and the importance of being that voice is that it's got to be effective, it's got to be heard, and sometimes you have to alter that voice in a way that you don't necessarily want to, but you do it so that you can be effective.
It's about building coalitions around the issues that are important. And I think the thing about that I would say is that the best bills are the bills that nobody's happy about, because everybody didn't get what they wanted, but everybody got something.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. If you are interested in some of the other questions that were asked, everyone has been asked to turn in a copy of their questions to me at the end of the session today, and I'll be more than willing to forward them over.
If they put their emails, I'll answer them.
Yep. All right, you guys all heard that. Put your emails if you'd like to have your questions answered. Well, thank you very much again for coming to our session, and I cannot thank you enough for offering and being a part of such a stimulating and an invigorating discussion about women in politics and in a variety of other ways. Once again, for those of you that are in attendance, this is one of the events that our One Book Initiative is actively engaging in for the entire academic year. Our next event, we will be screening the movie He Named Me Malala on November 5th. And then we will also have another lecture series where we will have a couple of speakers come in and talk about women in business and how to empower women in business. So hopefully all of you will be willing to attend and participate in that session as well. And if we can give our guest speakers a big round of applause. because they were phenomenal. Thank you again, Mayor Freeman-Wilson and Representative Candelaria Reardon.